blockchain and social impact. So the way I'd like to start this off is have you guys introduce yourselves, a little bit about your project. Don't take too long, and then I'll just start peppering you guys with questions if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think the mic is off, right? Is it? Oh, it's good. All right. So my name is Anton Mozgovoy. I'm the CTO of Humaniq. What we do is that we provide social and financial services for those who are considered to be unbanked. Now that translates into the three main services that we do provide is we create digital identities for those who don't have government IDs. We provide crypto wallets for those who don't have access to banking system. And we provide free and secure chats for those who don't have access to private communication. Last time I checked this morning, we have more than 207,000 users. So we actually grow faster than Telegram or WeChat in their first year, since we've been live only for 4 months. Now that's in the basic pretty much what we do. And again, I'm here to discuss why we chose blockchain and then what is the stake and our stake in this problem.
Hello, my name is Bobby Tinsley. I'm VP of Sales and one of the co-founders of Priatek. Priatek has patented prize-based digital promotions. We have an interactive network of digital kiosks and a mobile phone app that's deploying nationally and eventually internationally. Here in the US, we've got some really strong strategic partners. We've partnered with a lot of the top mall chains. We have access right now to 850 mall locations. We're launching in New York in 3 months, so we're really excited about our deployment here. We've also strategically partnered with a lot of gamification companies and media companies on the game side, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, Price is Right, Family Feud. So there's a lot of big integrations that's coming, and we believe gamification and the social engagement that we're going to talk about is the key driver to what we do.
So David Mondrus, I'm the CEO of Trive, and Trive fights fake news. So we actually use crowds to research on news stories and then have a checks and balances mechanism to make sure that people don't get out of hand.
Hi, I'm Bryan Cooley. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Zipchain. We're focused on high-performance blockchains, so allowing enterprise applications to actually succeed. And there's also some social-oriented projects we're working as well. So
for you, you said that your service is to provide banking services for the unbanked, and I hear this a lot, right? That's part of the, it seems to be part of the ethos and ethics of the blockchain space. One of the problems that they want to tackle is banking the unbanked. When I think about the unbanked, I think of people, let's say, in Africa, Southeast Asia, etc. But the hurdle that I have is if these people are unbanked and so poor, right, and they don't have access to these services, do they have access to a mobile phone so that they can get, a wallet application or a computer that they can access these funds that you're trying to, let's say, secure for them?
Sure, that's a good question. There's a common misconception that the quality of the network or the access to the mobile phones is very poor. In some areas, indeed, it is. However, 90% of the world is actually covered by the mobile network. So obviously, we're talking about edge, not even 2G, not even 3G. The problem is a bit more on the mobile, not just the mobile phone. I would say the smartphone side, right? There's a higher penetration for those button phones, the regular ones that we all forgot like 10 years ago. The smartphone problem is still there. And that's one of the things that we're also working with Chinese manufacturers to lower down the cost. And that's the part of our emission model where we try to help users to get the initial capital to pay off their first mobile phone, to get access to remote jobs, and then to actually pay it off, right? So there's an entire mechanism in terms of how they would get access to that smartphone.
So you're supporting your ecosystem by, let's say, walking the walk and helping your potential user get access to the mechanism to then control the value that they're storing.
Yeah, so more than 70% of the users that we have now is their first smartphone ever, and then our app is one of their first apps, obviously.
And how are you acquiring these potential, let's say, clients?
So it would be funny to try to market them through Facebook. Obviously, that doesn't work. So what happens is that we have a wide network of the ambassadors. Those are the people that do know their people and then do know what problems the other guys are actually facing. Okay. So we have the ambassadors from more than 40 countries, and those are the people who are actually helping us find a way to the unbanked.
Okay, great. So mall kiosk, mobile phone, rewarding people for accessing your application. And what I mean by application, not software, but your company's design. How do you see your company making a social impact? What is it about your company that might hit home from a blockchain perspective?
So there's a strong, for every social network, there's got to be a strong human driver, right? So we believe ours is prizes, right? There's a lot of opinions in the room on blockchain and networks and all of these things, but if you boil it down into every one of our DNA, everyone here loves to win and save. If I, say I'm going to send a Bitcoin out to someone, just, let me send it to you, everyone will volunteer. So what's beautiful about our platform is we start off the engagement experience with you win every time. And it's very powerful because it's at the point of sale. So you're in a mall, instead of paying $10,000, $15,000 a month for a static ad, even though that industry is growing to 500 billion internationally, it's irrelevant because you can't measure it. And we believe that anything that can't be measured in today's environment is at risk of being replaced. So we convert that ad to a prize ad. So we go to Nike or whoever our partner is and say, if you want to give out a prize, which they all want to do prize promotions, they just lack effective means to do them quickly, we'll convert that ad to a prize ad, and then we'll only charge you when someone walks up and actually chooses your prize or product from the menu, which proves they're actually interested in the first place. And so we have a Google-type model attached to that. And then on the mobile phone application, that helps grow our network. So we did our testing last year. Like I said, we have very strong partners in the mall side of things. We signed up 135,000 people in 6 months with no advertising. 1 out of 6 people downloaded our mobile app and continue to engage 38 times a month, earning us $25 per mobile user. It's $300 a year. Like, the RPU is insane. And they're incentivized to be able to obviously continue to engage with the brand. Sure. And we're tying in esports. So the third layer of this is the ability for you now to actually enter sweepstakes, tournaments, and challenges. And as you win tokens and rewards, be able to actually challenge your friends with those. So we believe that's a big part of this ecosystem, is as you tie in the esports, brands want to get into that. Sure. But they don't really have ways to actually merge in, and they're trying to figure it out. So we have a scalable platform to do it.
Awesome. So Dave, fighting fake news. So
yeah.
We've heard a lot about fake news from our president, certainly. What type of an impact do you plan on, having through your platform to fight fake news? How are you going to do that, and why is it important?
Well, why it's important is because the truth is important. We may not agree on policy, but at least we need to agree on facts. And oftentimes the facts are distorted. So I have a quote, and I won't read the whole quote, but it ends with, "We're intellectual prostitutes." And of course, if you say that to a journalist, they all get really offended. And what I say to them is, it's not my quote. I didn't say it. This was said by a senior editor of a New York paper at a closed dinner meeting of New York journalists in 1883, right, 150 years ago. And when you say this to people, they go, wait, that's now. No, it's not. It's very, very old. And the reason is because the incentive structures are wrong. By the time that you have consumed whatever information they're putting out and have been able to decide whether it makes sense or doesn't, they've already consumed your attention span. 70% of the U.S. population does not trust media. It's something like 85% of conservatives, 50% of independents, and 30% of Democrats. But overall, it's 70%. And you don't buy what you don't trust. So 70% of that money is being left on the table. People have talked a lot about citizen journalism. And when we're decentralizing and disintermediating centralized structures, media is one of those things. But the problem with citizen journalism is you don't know what's true. That's the problem we solve. And I think in the long run, we disrupt not just news and media verification, but really the entire media industry.
And just curious, why should I trust the citizen journalists over
right.
The New York Times, for instance?
Right. So
which I don't trust anyway, but
no. It's a great question. So when the New York Times is verifying data, you probably have 5 or 6 people in the mix at most, and those 5 or 6 people have very similar psychographic profiles. So similar demographics, similar points of view. In our system, it might be 50 or 60. And so what we do is we use the wisdom of crowds. And the wisdom of crowds is an old experiment done in the 1950s. It was replicated again in the 70s at MIT, 2007 at Columbia. And basically it works like this. You put a jar of jelly beans on the desk, and you ask people to guess how many beans in the jar. Each person will be dramatically off. But the average of those people is within 1% of the actual. Right, so we have a sophisticated checks and balances structure where 50 or 60 people interact with the story, reviewing each individual factoid, scoring its veracity, and the aggregate of that is what you get.
Sure. So you're crowdsourcing truth.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a huge social impact. I could see it.
Yeah, definitely.
And so your chain, right? Faster, enterprise level. But
Correct.
how are you applying it from a social impact perspective?
I'll mention a few things in a few different perspectives here. You know, first of all, if we look at Bitcoin, we obviously know it uses tremendous amount of power and electricity through its proof of work mechanism, which is great for security, though. So what we've done actually is we've turned proof of work on its head, where we're doing proof of work on the client side. So instead of the same people solving the same problem across multiple machines, it's more like if I want to send you a transaction, I just do something that takes a quarter second or a half second. That cumulative work ends up being something that makes the system secure. But on the flip side, we're not using a whole entire country's worth of power in order to make this happen. Sure. From a social impact perspective, we're doing a few things. Our team is worldwide, but I'm based in the Philippines, and so there are a lot of interesting things that able to do there. For example, we talked a little bit about the unbanked at the beginning, and part of that also is that, at least in the Philippines, there's a lot of politics involved in the major banks trying to kind of push out the rural banks. And so blockchain is one facet where we're actually able to work with a lot of the rural banks, which is quite exciting. Something else we're also talking with, if you look at a charity or any kind of charity, it's really quite exciting because you can do chain of custody. Like I can look at maybe 10 years from now, I can say that $100 or $1,000 I gave to a charity, I can see that chain of custody events that happened, and I think that's quite interesting.
So you're bringing transparency to the charity world in a way that may never have existed.
Yeah, correct. But I think what's interesting is even if, I was talking kind of from the charity angle or rural banks or unbanked, but I think the impact of our blockchain actually goes far beyond that. So we're doing thousands of transactions per second on chain, and we have, a dozen already enterprise clients, multinationals, conglomerates that are going to be issuing tokens on our platform. The impact of that is when you're looking at power, real estate, trade finance, commodities trading, logistics. Even just take an example of logistics or supply chain, it's quite fascinating because now you can track the temperature of an item, you can track the location, when those goods were actually delivered. Or in the case of a charity or relief effort, okay, I can track that, these items disappeared at this time, or this food was spoiled so that, it arrives, people shouldn't eat it because the temperature was too hot. So I think the impact of what we're doing is tremendous from transparency all around.
How many transactions can your chain handle currently?
We can do more than 1 million transactions per second off chain, about 2,000 on chain. This is a real product. It's not something that's fantasy, and that's why we've closed about $27 million in the last 2 weeks in private funding, and kind of wrapping up that round hopefully in the next couple of days.
Awesome.
So
yeah. So where do you see I guess we'll come back down the line on whoever wants to volunteer, but where do you see blockchain moving going forward from a social impact perspective? What more can be done with the developers in the space, and how could we change more lives?
I think it's kind of in my perspective anyway, it's sort of it's a group effort that we all have to just educate people more about why blockchain, not just cryptocurrency, matters. And I think that at least for me, like we got into crypto almost 7 years ago, and that there's kind of that natural evolution that we have of understanding. And once you kind of understand the fundamentals, at least for me, and most people I meet, it's like a light bulb goes off, and you can't stop thinking about it, and the more people that any of us can educate, the more those people then can educate, and then so the whole world can start thinking about what else can we do. And for me, I spend about half my time just talking to enterprises and businesses and people about the technology and what we do, and also how it could maybe impact their business. But then they come back with ideas that I never would have thought of, and it's fascinating.
Dave?
Yeah, so for sure, banking the unbanked is pretty important. Digital identities, especially for refugees, is incredibly important. And I think the blockchain represents generational change. And really, in order for it to progress forward, what we need to do is either convince, educate, or replace the current administrators who are basically getting in the way. So you talk about banks. You talk about banks trying to push out the rural banks. You talk about unbanked in the third world. Well, in the United States, there was this thing called Operation Choke Point, which created many, many unbanked undesirables in the United States. And that is basically just the regulatory environment finding a reason why the blockchain should exist. And so I would love to see more penetration at the retail level, at the point of sale level. So you don't have to do the conversion from crypto to fiat. You can just pay with crypto. And I think once we get above 10 or 15% of the population or the transaction base in that scenario, we're going to 100% very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. From Priatek's perspective, I think, the blockchain community does a really good job of explaining why. Why blockchain, why this, why that, and maybe not as good of a job of saying how. And our whole, philosophy is there needs to be real world utilization to the products and you were talking earlier about tokenizing securities and things that, real estate assets. Real world usage is a critical factor with what we're doing here. I mean, at the end of the day, investing $100 million, $50 million in these ideas that might be brilliant on paper, but how are they actually going to implement themselves, right? One of our huge motivators and inspirations is, Steve Jobs, right, with the iPhone. And the way we look at that from his perspective is he created a platform. And what I always say is the phone in our pocket, right? The apps that you have on it today are going to change over the next 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. They're going to get replaced, but the phone's still in your pocket because Steve created a platform. Right, so what we're creating with our network, we're creating a platform, and it's ever changing, and it has to modify and change. The technologies that we're integrating with blockchain, why are we using them? Because they're the best solutions today, but we're not married to them. Idealistically, we're agnostic. Like, we just want the best solution for our platform that we're creating, and I think we need to take that perspective, and that will help us all, move the community to the next level.
What do you say to the person? I'm sorry, we'll get back to you. But something popped up. What do you say to the person that says, well, you don't need a crypto, you don't need to reward people in crypto, you could reward them with a coupon, and they'll do the same action after winning and they'll be incentivized to go to the store anyway, right? So, what do you say to that person?
So there's two parts to this, right? So when we looked at doing this, we looked at a centralized version, and we did a loyalty point system last year in our testing. And one of the main problems is advertising fraud, right? So there's $7 billion a year that's wasted in the advertising industry with, digital coupons and ad fraud and bots, buying all of these fake clicks and things like that. So, what's beautiful about the blockchain is it creates an immutable record, and where literally every offer, when a merchant issues a 30% off on our platform, when you tie that to the blockchain, we know that it exists, and through the technology that we're using, we actually have the ability to basically tokenize that coupon and create greater flexibility for the merchant to actually control their own currency. So that's one side of it. The other side of it on a an expansion perspective, right, is that you have if you do a digital token that's a loyalty token, it doesn't allow you to actually tap into the true nature of decentralization, which is creating the ability for other merchant aggregators to plug into our network. So think of Priatek as like the protocol level, right? We've created the box. And if you're First Data with all of your thousands of merchants, well, you want to do gamification programs, but that's not your core business. Well, you can just tap into our protocol and you can reward people with our tokens. And you can have the underlying infrastructure of what we created, which blockchain solves that.
Okay, cool. Back to, I don't even remember what the question was. Just go ahead.
So the question was, why blockchain? And
I said, actually, it was what more can we do through blockchain for social impact? Go ahead.
And that raises another question, well, why do you need blockchain to do that? I want to raise a pragmatic question here. It's not a question, it's a statement, is that blockchain is yet another instrument. It means that you have to apply it where it's needed. And then the question comes here is that pure decentralization is expensive indeed. And that's why we see lots of pushback in terms of hybrid models, right? So where you try to find, the best from centralized and decentralized. The question here is that you have to go back to real problems, and the real problems are lack of infrastructure. Why the World Bank or Visa, MasterCard, why we're still even talking about the problems of the unbanked in 2018? Well, that's because there's no infrastructure to solve that question. And there you have to reference back, what is the crypto? A crypto, by its nature, by its design, right, it has no borders. When we talk about vouchers, coupons, cash, now that thing has borders. That thing is physical, so when you try to digitalize it, you have all of these stupid problems because by nature it's border, right? Okay. It has borders. Now crypto doesn't. And that's why we see all of these projects trying to experiment, right? None of them, we haven't found this, ultimate pill in terms of how we're going to solve this problem. But this is yet another instrument, and we're trying to see that.
Well, you seem to be, and maybe I'm just ignorant, but you're the only company that I've heard of that is trying to bank the unbanked and actually putting together the infrastructure to make that possible. Is that true?
Yeah, so when we're thinking about, well, again, and that's a funny thing, the unbanked is a very vague term, right? And it's different for every single person here in this room. So when we're thinking about, well, whether we want the marketing project or the real project, if we want a real project, we have to work with the existing infrastructure. We don't have enough money and time to build our own and say that, now jump, hop on, and then let's work.
Sure.
And then, to be honest, and then just continue, what we've heard is that the only existing infrastructure right now is mobile phones. And it is purely global, and it's going to stay. It may evolve, and it will, but it's going to stay.
Okay. Yeah. I'd like to open it up now for questions from our audience. Anyone have any questions for our panelists? Go ahead in the back.
What regions are you in, or what states are you in with your solution?
Right. So we are open in 10 African countries now. Our major targeted audience base is from 5 countries. So that's Uganda, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, Senegal, and Tanzania.
Other questions from our audience? Sure, go ahead.
Question for Priatek. What's the roadmap of city scaling and things like that?
We are deploying our kiosks in New York with CBS in August. So we have 20 of the top malls and about 50 hotels, and then we're going to the top 10 markets in the U.S. over the next 6 months. We're doing our pre-sale right now. We've raised $15 million. We're using those funds, obviously, to scale out the kiosks and grow the network.
Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, I think that's it. If we can give our panelists a round of applause.